Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. If you are able to turn your cameras on, we would love to see you. If you can't, we also understand. I want to welcome you all to our final session of the Making Connections series at Reimagine. My name is Andy Engel, and I lead virtual public programs here at Reimagine. I am joined today from Reimagine by Nicole Tan, who's helping out on this call. Nicole, thank you for being here. If this is your first Reimagine event, we're so glad that you're here. Reimagine is a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community, people of different backgrounds, people of different ages, different races, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations and gender identities, people of faith, people of no faith, all coming together to support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality, and to transform life's biggest challenges into meaningful action and growth. And loneliness is one of the greatest challenges we are facing today. Reimagine resources, support groups, events like this one today are free, sliding scale, and accessible to the public. This is made possible by the support and generosity of folks like you. So for those of you who already made a tax-deductible donation when you registered for this event, thank you. When we kicked off this series in April, we gathered 25 innovators sharing 25 innovative projects. And since then, we've invited a handful of those speakers to return and go into more depth about strategies to make connections and to strengthen a sense of belonging in this lonely, lonely world. Last week, our focus was on intergenerational strategies to reduce loneliness. Donna Griffin recognized the role of her grandparents in raising her and why she created the Eldera app to connect olders and youngers. And we had Dr. Renee Mitchell, who described her aha moment at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. She had this fleeting moment in a hardware store with a Black senior that inspired her to spread the Black Joy virus to counteract the other virus. And her whole project was bringing people of different generations together in this time of fear and isolation. Okay, now I can all see you. Since this series is all about making connections, please start using the chat and tell us where you are zooming in from and the places in your community where you find opportunities to connect with others. We'd love to take a look. What is going to unfold? Today's conversation is led by Allison Gilbert, and it will be around 40 minutes or so. You'll learn about our guest shortly. Then we'll take questions from the chat. So please, when you are listening to our wonderful speakers, if a question occurs to you, please use the chat to ask that question. I'll be collecting those towards the end of the hour so that we have some time for Q&A. And after the hour, you are all invited to remain for breakout sessions. We'd like to practice what we preach and use this third place, Reimagine, to foster some meaningful connections. And you'll learn more about this term from Allison and our speakers. So please stick around for that. Finally, in a day or two, you'll receive a link of this recording with information about all of our speakers. And now I'd like to introduce our host, Allison Gilbert. Allison is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and author. She's a longtime Reimagine collaborator. And with the late, great Dr. Ruth Westheimer, she co-authored the book, The Joy of Connections. Allison, take it away.
This is such a thrill for me to be here today. Thank you so much, Andy, and the entire Reimagine team. I must start by saying that this series has been so beautiful for me. And I want to just start by saying, Andy, exactly what you just said. We practice what we preach. And for me, that has been, Andy, my friendship with you. I am so grateful for your leadership at Reimagine, for enabling this series to happen. And every single time we are done with one of these conversations, I am so grateful because my inbox gets flooded or my Instagram lights up, and that makes me feel so full because that means after this conversation is over, I get to look forward to being in conversation in an ongoing way. It's not just here, it continues. And so, even though today is the last in our series, I profoundly hope this is the beginning, the continuation of our relationship. Since my partnership with Reimagine began, I have gotten to know thousands of you, and that has made my work life, my personal life richer and fuller. So I just wanted to say thank you. June is a particularly important month. Andy mentioned that I co-wrote the late, great Dr. Ruth Westheimer's final book, The Joy of Connections. The reason why June is so important to us is that her birthday was June 4th, and Dr. Ruth would have turned 97 years old. So she began this quest to help eradicate, to end the loneliness epidemic when she was only 95. So no matter how old you are coming to this conversation, you have a place, you have a role, and we all collectively have a job to do. So that is my preamble. I want to start with Dixon, if you don't mind. And I'm so grateful that you are joining us all the way from Zimbabwe today. You are really the founder of this groundbreaking program called the Friendship Bench. And what I love so much about this, that it sounds on the surface so simple, using the wisdom of grandmothers who are trained, by the way, and I want you to go into that, to help really end depression, anxiety for those who are of any age or stage. This has taken off. It is remarkable and innovative. Help us understand what the Friendship Bench is. And I know that you started it in 2016 because one of your patients suffered from not being able to reach you in that patient's time of need. Tell us about it, Dixon.
Thank you, Allison. And firstly, just thank you for having me. Yeah, so my story of the Friendship Bench really is anchored in a tragic event, which is the loss of a patient of mine to suicide during my formative years working as a psychiatrist. Erica was her name. Erica was under my care for just over 2 years. And it was at a time when I thought she was stable and she was thriving and she was doing well. And one morning I get a call from Erica's mother telling me that Erica had taken her own life. She'd hang herself from a mango tree in the family garden. It was devastating. I was completely devastated. But what really affected me the most was the fact that Erica's parents knew that Erica needed help. Erica herself knew that she needed help and she needed to come to the hospital, but they just didn't have the equivalent of 10 US dollars to get onto a bus to bring Erica to the hospital where I worked. And that story made me realize that I needed to find a way of taking mental health out of the hospital and into the community. And that really was the beginning of the Friendship Bench story.
So before I bring in Anne and I bring in Orly, I want to give a little bit more context to what this looks like. We're actually physically talking about a bench, and we're actually physically talking about grandmothers who are going to sit there and be in community with those who raise their hand or sit down to say that they need support. And what I love so much about this is that I don't want anyone to take this as a little effort. The Center for Global Mental Health has called this an intervention. So describe what this actually looks like. Describe the intervention.
Thanks, Alison. So putting it in sort of more scientific terms, I guess, for lack of a better word, the intervention is actually a brief psychological form of therapy, which is based on the principles of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. So we train our grandmas in the basics of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, with an emphasis on behavior activation, activity scheduling, and problem solving. And that training can take anything from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the core competencies of those grandmas or grandparents that we are training. After they are trained, each one is allocated a wooden park bench in the community where she or he lives. We then facilitate referrals to that bench through social media, through schools, through primary healthcare facilities, and we provide supervision using, mobile phones, and we also provide supervision using clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. And so we create this cycle, where people come to the bench, they have anything between 4 to 6 sessions, and after those sessions, they are invited to join a support group in their community. But let me end, Alison, by saying that although the Friendship Bench is anchored in rigorous research with over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications, it's really about creating space for people to feel comfortable with being vulnerable. Because when you create that space, that's when people actually open up and share their stories. And at Friendship Bench, one of the most important lessons that we've learned is that when people share their stories, that's truly when healing begins. I'll stop
Yes,
there.
authenticity is where it is. If you don't share what's going on with you, a bunch of things can't happen, right? If you don't share what's really going on with you, you can't invite help in because no one's going to know that something is wrong. And something else happens when you let someone know what's really happening. You let them share with you not only how they could help, but maybe what's going on with them. And if you're both sharing, that's where you can really dig in, right? That's where it's not so slippery and superficial. You have something substantive to talk about. And just to further define our terms, we are talking about third places here. And the reason why the Friendship Bench qualifies, so to speak, is that the bench exists, as you have mentioned, in community. So it's not home, right? You're not at home and you're not at work. You're somewhere else. This is the third space. It's in a community where you can come together and meet other people. This is what Anne Basting does so well. Anne, you are an artist, you are a writer, and you really believe that creativity can change lives. And what I love in talking with you is that you are a lead team member of the Memory Cafe Alliance, and you are growing and mushrooming this initiative. And tell us about the Memory Cafe Alliance. What is it and where can we find it?
I'll start easy peasy, and I bet it'll show up in the chat as soon as I say it. Memorycafedirectory.com is probably the easiest way. We're really trying to guide people. There are 502 currently listed memory cafes on the new directory. Really, they've been around since about 2009, I think, in the US, but drawing on the model of memory cafes from really all over the world. The Netherlands is where they started. made their way to the UK. I was really inspired to grow them coming out of the tremendous pain of the pandemic for people living with cognitive changes like dementia and their caregivers, 85% of whom live at home. And so if you think that 85% of people have no access to, say, programming that is in residential care settings, they really feel very isolated and really shut in and locked away from friendships that can start to erode because people don't feel comfortable engaging or know how to engage. So I read this study that said Japan started with about under 50 memory cafes, and within 5 years had grown it to over 4,000. And I thought, we can do that here, and we really need to do it here. They take off like wildfire in third spaces, which is why this is such an ideal conversation. There's a lot in libraries, in literal cafes, bookstores. Sometimes in Wisconsin, we had, where I was living before I moved to Georgia, we had over 130 of them. We love our taverns in Wisconsin, and there were memory cafes in wine bars, taverns, neighborhood bars, places where people all had a memory of going and felt welcomed into their community, that were welcoming and trusting spaces. And really, all it is a place to find friendship and to have some meaningful social programming that are either free or very low cost just to offset supplies. So we're really, the Memory Cafe Alliance started as a way to meet that goal of growing the number of cafes in the US tenfold in 10 years. So we built a new directory. We put 3 free training modules on that same link and site. So those of you who are already working in third spaces, please go and start your own. It's super easy. And we're also forming and the Alliance is really there to help support people who are trying to start them.
I would like to add a little color and visual to this. I'm having trouble imagining what it looks like. So you walk in, and what do you see and what do you do?
I'll tell you about the last one I went to, which was hosted by my fellow lead, one of the people on the lead advisory team for the Cafe Alliance, Susan McFadden, and her dear husband, John McFadden, in the Fox Valley in Wisconsin, near Appleton. It's in a library, and you walk into the community room, and the tables are set in a semicircle. Someone greets you, gives you a name tag, welcomes you, says, would you care for some coffee or tea? That's the cafe part, right? Maybe some cookies. Then everybody settles in, talks to each other, because they've been going maybe once a month for a couple of months. So it's really about not just receiving friendship, but providing it as a purpose, a sense of meaning to the attendees, welcoming new people. And then there'll be a little programming, usually music. Music is always a big one. Some visual arts activities. My other hat is with a nonprofit called Time Slips, which is improvisational storytelling. That's a big activity in memory cafes. And then you wind up and wish each other well, maybe have another cup of coffee, and then you're on your way.
I love the fact that you incorporate music. There is research out of Stanford University that really shows the healing power, the transformative power of music to really set the stage for authentic conversation, for intimacy, for allowing our shoulders to drop and just cracking ourselves open for those moments of conversation. You mentioned over coffee, tea, food, a table. And that, of course, is the perfect segue to Orly Israel, which I am so happy to bring Orly into this conversation. He's joining us from California. And I could not be happier to include you. You are the creator of the listening table, and you help people rediscover, I want to say, the healing and connecting power of not talking all the time, but of listening. How did you get this idea? What is the listening table? And help us understand really the core of what you do.
Well, it came from a place of feeling like I was looking for more belonging in my life. And I wasn't really able to understand that until I listened a lot to other people and started listening to myself more. The idea came from a training I was taking where someone was teaching communication skills. And he said, learning communication skills is a lot like learning how to swim. You can read as many books on swimming as you'd like, but if you don't get in the water, you're never going to learn how to do it. And so I was really motivated, inspired by that, and decided to jump in the water by learning how to listen. But I wanted to do it with strangers because going up to a friend and saying, "Hey, can I listen to you?" was just a little intimidating, and I thought it would be weird. So I just put a sign that said, "Here to listen" on a table and brought it outside. And I ended up having one of the deepest, most meaningful conversations with a total stranger. And then I started seeing her in the community, and it became something that formed a meaningful relationship. And I kept doing this table over and over again, and it would be the most meaningful conversations I would have all week.
And you bring this table around. It's not stationary, it's mobile. And so, where do you bring it? What's the reaction? And what are people lining up to talk to you to say? What are they hungry to share with you that perhaps they feel like they don't have another outlet?
The thing that people talk about the most, and it's always a great reaction. I get so many thumbs ups. I get so many, I wish I had time to sit down and talk. I feel like I really wish I could be heard right now. And the thing that most people talk about is challenges in relationships they have where they say, "Oh, you're here to listen." I don't have people like that in my life to listen to me. I have had so many people sit down and tell me about something where they just can't find empathy for themselves, or they can't find someone who will listen to them for more than a couple minutes without trying to fix their problem or tell them it's not a big deal. And so, because of that, I think that the biggest thing that people resonate with is just a place to share a story with another person who cares.
I want to just give some oxygen around what you've just said. We have endless places this year with social media to share with tens of thousands of countless people whatever we want. And what you have just discovered is that shouting something or sharing something into the ether is really not the same as finding one or two people who you can trust, who will listen without judgment, who maybe won't shout back their advice. And so this is the context that your third space is creating. And it's so powerful to me that I want just to make sure that the context was set. And I want to go back to you, Dr. Chabanda, if that is okay. I want to get a sense of scale for the friendship bench. How many grandmothers are now in your army? How many people have sat down all over the world, I will say, not just Zimbabwe, to sit on a friendship bench? Because I know it's well beyond Zimbabwe. I know it's well beyond the continent of Africa. It is on fire, your movement. So give us a sense of scale.
Thanks, Alison. Based on our last, review of the numbers, we are currently sitting on just over 1 million people having sat on a bench to talk to one of our grandmothers. And with regards to the actual number of grandmothers in Zimbabwe, where we have the most accurate data, we have over 3,000 grandmothers who are providing therapy from a bench every single day of the week. And we have replicated the model in a number of countries, including the United States, in Washington, D.C., in New Orleans. Last year, we were in El Salvador. And we also have a presence in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and a number of other places. In a way, we're kind of losing track of the number of people that are being helped through the Friendship Bench, because my idea is really to encourage as many people as possible out there to do this work and really drive the movement. And that's one of the reasons why we are offering free trainings for anyone who is interested. If you are 65 and above, we will train you for free to do a Friendship Bench. If you are under 65 and you're interested, you have to pay at least $59. And if you can't, we will find a way of still training you to do this work. My big vision is to really have as many people as possible being able to utilize what we've learned on the Friendship Bench, and to make it possible for a Friendship Bench to be within walking distance for everyone everywhere on the globe.
What I love so much about every single event that I do with Reimagine, and it's been ongoing for years, is that I try to make these conversations super practical. And so, one thing that I wanted to share is that if you wanted to do a friendship bench where you are, Dr. Chibanda, can you talk to us about what a friendship bench in a box is?
Great, Alison. So the Friendship Bench in a box is our scale strategy. This is essentially the toolkit or your DIY toolkit that will enable you to learn the steps of setting up a friendship bench wherever you are in the world, how to use some of the tools that we use in terms of screening, because, not everybody that sits on the bench will be, suitable, for the bench. Some people need to be referred because they are genuinely suicidal, or someone might have a severe mental health condition that needs to be seen by a psychiatrist. So, how do you identify those kind of people? So, the toolbox enables you to do all of those things, and the toolbox is something that we can ship off to people wherever they are who are interested in doing Friendship Bench.
Thank you so much. And Anne, I want to bring you back in again because in addition to the Memory Cafe Alliance, you are the author of numerous books, not just one, not just two, numerous books, including, I'm going to look at the title so I don't get it wrong. It's called Creative Care, a Revolutionary Approach to Dementia and Elder Care. And the part of this conversation that I want to pivot to with your permission in terms of third space is that you have created something called care showers, like a bridal shower, but not. Help us understand what a care shower is.
Well, it was born out of a really practical moment where a good friend of mine, who's an artist, fabulous printmaker, was caring for her mother in really the last days in hospice in her own home. And I said, let's catch up. And she said, can we do it at my house? Because I have to administer medications every 30 minutes to my mother. I was like, wow, I wanted to talk to you about caring for my mother with dementia, which is a long road of caregiving. And she said, at the end of this, I'm going to have so much information and know where to go with it. I wish there was something like a shower you could throw friends who are starting this journey into caregiving. And we both went, oh my gosh, we could do that. So careshowers.org, we treated it actually in the beginning like an art project. I'm also an artist. And we held these model showers right on the model of the baby shower, which is something that people have in their heads. And then we played games. We really wanted to turn it away from just the tragedy narrative that everyone assumes around care toward shared community. We made care cards that we said kind of crack open the space between get well and sympathy. There's
Mm.
nothing in there. And also then after the games, we shared care stories, which could be funny or sad or really the gamut. So we were allowing in the whole range of emotions. And now we created really, there's photos, beautiful things on that very simple blog site. And where we are now is really trying to find a corporation whose wellness benefit area would like to roll it out as a sample for their employees, who many of whom are dealing with caregiving but have no sense of recognition or sharing among their colleagues.
I love that so much. What a creative third space. I think that's just really genius. Orly, I want to bring you back into this conversation. We talked about the listening table and something, before we opened the curtain to bring everyone into this conversation, I told you something very personal before we logged on, which was that I was so struck by something. In April, we featured everyone here on this beautiful event where we honored 25 innovators in 2025 who are combating the loneliness epidemic. That was in April. But in January, Orly, you lost your home in the California wildfires. You did not tell anyone. And yet, you learned something about community and connection as a result of your own experience. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so in January, the house burned down that I was living in. And it really changed the way that I was walking through the world because I lost a huge portion of the stability that I had. And I also had recently left my job to focus on listening training more. So I was very concerned with my own 2 feet. And what really brought me a lot of hope and something that I thought was so incredible was the community support. Even though so many people in the community had lost their homes, people who hadn't, uh, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't feel self-serving to me, but I'd spent a lot of time trying to give back to other people and trying to be there for people, and something about showing the world that I care about being there for people made it really obvious for people to know that I really care about when people would be there for me. And so people really showed up, and I've been living in other people's houses for the last 6 months and benefiting from just the compassion that other people have shown me.
Well, it's very interesting that you talk about the reciprocity part of caring. That is something that the past Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has talked a lot about, that once you ask for help and you raise your hand that you need, the next time it's like a domino effect. Somebody else then can then know that they showed up for you. And then when they need help, it's okay to raise your hand and say, I need something too. It's like this wonderful sense of permission that when you give, at some point, it's okay to receive. And I wonder if that reciprocity, if what Dr. Morthy talked about is really exactly what you're describing.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I'm fortunate that since I talk about communication skills a lot and how to be a better listener, I think that there is a barrier that I was able to navigate maybe more than many people, where some people are so excited to give help that they aren't necessarily thinking about what kind of help people necessarily need.
Mm.
People who are needing are a little too focused on getting their needs met than being able to communicate clearly what they need. And so being able to have the ability to kind of influence or guide people to say, hey, if you are offering something specific, let's make it really clear. Or if you want to help, let's not put the burden of figuring out how you can help on people who are already struggling. And so it did really highlight for me that there is, even if somebody needs help and somebody wants to give help, sometimes they don't connect and it becomes overwhelming for everybody. So
Yeah, and what's also interesting too in Dr. Morthy's research, so many times when people are feeling socially isolated, feeling lonely, their self-esteem plummets. They don't feel like they are worthy of these relationships. But by accepting help, by saying, yes, I need you, it restores some of that self-confidence that some people may be missing, that they are valuable, they are seen, they are heard, they are needed. And so by accepting help, if you want to just spin it a little bit, you're allowing somebody else to show up and be useful. And that can help them build the confidence that they may or may not need to move forward in their own relationships. Dr. Chabanda, I want to come back to you if you don't mind. You wrote a book about the very first grandmothers. It's called The Friendship Bench. And you really profile some of these amazing leaders in your work. Who are these women? How did they find you initially, or how did you find them? Tell us about the book.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. So the book is really the formative years of the Friendship Bench. And I write about the first 14 grandmothers and how they inspired a mental health revolution, because they changed how I think and practice as a psychiatrist. And I wanted to share that journey of how these grandmothers made me realize that there's so much over medicalization of human suffering the world over, and there's a need for us all to truly lean into people's stories and not lean into people's diagnosis. I must say, there is room for diagnosis. Don't get me wrong there. But what I'm trying to say here is, regardless of what your diagnosis is, this was the first big lesson I learned from the grandmas. Regardless of what your diagnosis is, you have a story. And when we lean into your story, we connect. When we connect, we create a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose, at a community level. And so I deliberately chose to focus on those 14 grandmothers because they've really shaped how I think as a psychiatrist. And they've made me realize really the power of culture, the power of the wisdom of our elders in our community, and how they carry the battle scars of life with grace and dignity, and how each one of us can truly learn from them, how we can make the world a better place. I'll stop there. So a lot of that is in my book, The Friendship Bench. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And I want to come back to you because you do so many wonderful projects in this third space conversation that we are talking about. It's not just these cafes, but what I was so impressed about when I did a deep dive into your work as an artist, as an author, you also do theater projects to bring people together. And tell us about Within a Single Rose.
Um, I I find that sometimes, and particularly I come to the work starting 20, well, almost 30 years ago with on a locked Alzheimer's unit. And so this approach to connecting and bonding through story needs to be adapted for people who don't have easy access to memory. And when memory becomes fractured, you need another way to bring people together. And so from those very early roots, I found shifting away from memory toward connecting through imagination is really a place that I really think when people are bridging over difference, that imagination, creativity, arts-based languages are really an accelerant. When you share imagination together and create something together, it's an accelerant to social connection. That's the way I have found over the years. So we created these over the past 25, 30 years, these little kind of creativity loops that you can share with another person. And you can do that just one-on-one right away. We call it beautiful questions. Or you can kind of do them in a series over time and accumulate them and build them into a community celebration. So I've done art exhibits, I've done theater plays, dance movement, you can do all kinds of different things. And then you can take apart a big mythic story, which is one of my favorite things to do. And within a single rose stems from The Little Prince as a mythic story that you can take apart into themes and then break into beautiful questions that you can ask other people. So one is just what is a rose? What do you think of when you think of a rose? Could you show me how a rose blooms with your hands? And that's one of my favorite workshops to do, is the blooming of the rose with a group of older people all doing it together. So yeah.
So before I bring back Andy to look through the questions in the chat, I want to encourage folks, if you have not put questions in the chat, this is your last call to do so. Please take advantage of this moment. We have three of the most expert of experts here with us today about third places. And so you came here for a reason. And if you have questions, I don't want you to get off this call, in about 15 minutes or so and just kick yourself that I should have asked my question. This is your shot. Please put it in the chat so we can make sure that we give you what you came for. But Anne, before I go back to Andy, all of this sounds great. The idea of bringing some theatrical movement to this challenge that we're talking about here. But if I'm listening to this at home, I wouldn't even know where to go, where to begin, where I live. Would I call my local town theater? Would I call the local hospital? How would I start this type of program?
I would say, well, I put in the chat where to go to start a memory cafe. So really anyone can do that. And then for this approach, I mean, in some ways, that's the superpower I've developed over these many, many years, is figuring out how to get people to overcome their creative nervousness and develop sort of a creative confidence, like really describing this in the simplest of terms. And I would lead people to, I put in the link dementiafriendlyamerica.org has, if you look at time slips there, that's the other a nonprofit I work with, there's a free friends and family training that really walks people through this very simple shift from memory to imagination and around bringing people into a shared sense of discovery with these beautiful questions. Super simple. You already have all these skills deep inside of you. It's really just that we've been told over the many years somewhere that we're not creative and made to believe it, and it's a real crime. Open it back up again, and it's yours to play with.
I love that. I know I saw the links sprinkled throughout the chat. If you go back and you scroll back up, you will see all these links that Reimagine has put in the chat. Thank you for going into a little bit more detail. Andy, I do want to bring you back in. I know you've been scouring the chat, and I thank you so much for doing that.
My pleasure. So let's start with a question that came in from Chris. He asks, I am curious about the public nature of the third places you have all created. How does this setting create the conditions for meaningful connection and support or intervention?
Dr. Chibanda, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think I would say, and this was one of my concerns when I first started Friendship Bench, with the grandmas. I was like, in fact, initially, I thought we should do the therapy inside of the health facilities. And the grandmothers, the first 14 grandmothers, were like, human beings are social beings. They love to connect outdoors. The reason why taking interventions outdoors becomes stigmatizing is because of the language that you use and the way you present these interventions. Let me tell you a very short story. When I started First Friendship Bench, I, as a psychiatrist, thinking as a clinician, actually called it the mental health bench. And you won't believe this, Alison, but no one wanted to sit on a mental health bench. And it was the first 14 grandmas who actually suggested we change the name to Friendship Bench. And it was the first 14 grandmas who also advised to use language that is rooted in the community, language that people can identify with. So we don't use clinical terms. We talk about stories. We talk about uplifting people, so we remove all that language that is stigmatizing to make it a safe place to actually engage in public, although it is rooted in a lot of rigorous clinical research. I'll stop there.
Oh, what you're talking about, by the way, is breaking down the shame, the stigma, that taboo. When Andy first introduced our time together today, he talked about the book that I co-wrote with Dr. Ruth. And if you know Dr. Ruth's work, it was never in a forward-facing way about loneliness. She was known for talking about sex. However, let me give you the headline. When she first started and became famous in the 1980s, what was the epidemic then? It was the AIDS epidemic. And she talked openly and honestly about educating people about love and sex and homosexuality, because all of that carried shame, stigma, and taboo. So now we are here with the loneliness epidemic, and she saw that connection, that we need to talk about loneliness like the new epidemic that carries shame, stigma. But the more we talk about it, the more we give voice, the more we educate, the more we change our vocabulary, like Dr. Chibanda just said, we can meet this new epidemic head on and cut down some of those headwinds that prevent people from getting the types of supports that they most need. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. You and Dr. Ruth like this. Andy, back to you.
There were a couple of questions that came up that have frequently come up at past Making Connections series. It's a question about access to events that take place in person. These came from Vicky and Sonia. Vicky says, I still need to wear a mask as I am high risk. I feel embarrassed, so I tend to stay inside. How can I overcome this fear? And then Sonia asked, as someone with long COVID who has become immunocompromised and still living with COVID precautions, I wish we could take into consideration people with disabilities, people who are immunocompromised. So I have a question, I guess. I'm going to tweak this question into something else also. Um, all of your projects, you speakers, guest speakers, are taking place, I would say, mostly in person. Can you imagine the Friendship Bench, the listening table, or Memory Cafe experiences happening online effectively? So I'm curious about that.
I would love Orly for you to answer this, and I'll tell you why. Because Orly founded something called warmlines.org, and I find that to be very inspiring. It could be a part of this conversation, Orly, too, from your work with the listening table, but I know you are very active in this online space.
Yeah, so warmlines.org is a directory of peer support phone lines that use trained professionals to basically provide phone support for people who need support with anything they're going through, whether it's a crisis or loneliness or not a crisis. And these lines are always full. People are always calling. There's never enough support. It's really challenging for me to put into words how desperate people are for human connection, and also how little people want to spend time on the computer talking to people, compared to being in person with others. And so we're seeing that in a lot of data. Every social media platform, people are gravitating towards the live video or the stories element. Just for context, like there's the reels and there's the posts and there's the stories, which are the lowest produced but more human versions. And so people really want to connect with other people. And the reason that I care about in person is because even though a solution to loneliness temporarily is talking to somebody, a long-term solution is community building, and you have to start building community where you are.
I thank you very much for offering that. Anne, do you want to add anything about that?
Memory cafes are virtual as well. And I've done during the pandemic, especially time slips did phone-based storytelling with training artists to call. Each artist had 10 older adults that they did. And we piloted it, but I know there's several other organizations that do phone-based connection like that. There's something about phone that is particularly, I think, for older people, uh, easier, just a vocal connection. The mechanism is simpler, and also we happen to be working with a lot of people with low vision, so it was much easier. So I think those things are out there for virtual connection, but I think my fear, and some of the work I've been doing, particularly, I just held a salon in my own home called with the theme of good neighbors, that there's something about this real cultural shift toward the digital that has, I think, created a crisis in understanding what it means to be a good neighbor, in the proximity with the people immediately around you. What is okay to expect from each other, and how can you communicate with each other? And I think that's a conversation that needs to grow.
Dr. Ruth was nothing short of funny, very funny. At 4'7", she was short and funny. And what she would said is that she would totally support someone if they're baking a cake to pretend that they ran out of eggs just to have a reason to knock on someone's door. Like, we're coming so used to ordering, our groceries to our door. You forget about these little wonderful neighbor moments. Like, I just ran out of milk. I'm making coffee. Do you have like a half a cup? And I took that to heart. I thought that was just, here's where we are. We're so hyper independent, and we have these apps that can answer our every whim, where we really don't need, I put in quotes, we're talking about the need of connections. Of course, I understand how this is an odd thing to say. We don't need, for our cake making, the neighbor to lend us an egg. However, there's a price to pay for this hyper independence, as I saw in the chat. So you have Dr. Ruth's permission to feign running out of vegetable oil the next time you're making a cake.
Really
Andy.
quickly, let
Yeah,
me
yeah,
just
yeah.
say that we had at our salon a post-it neighbor tribute window where you could put the name of a neighbor and then why you were creating a tribute to them. And one person wrote down Angie because she saw nails in our driveway and brought us a magnet. And I just thought that's such a beautiful, simple thing.
Love
Anyway.
that. I really, really love that. I think it tests what the current social norms are. I remember recently being in an elevator with a bunch of 20-somethings. I'll spare you the whole story, but email me, please, if you want the details. And no one looked up from their phones to acknowledge when I walked in the elevator. And I was like, wow, we are standing inches apart. We are living, breathing human beings. and we're not just even acknowledging good morning. So I do think this is a very important, a very meaningful battle that we are all in. And I think we're doing the work. Dr. Chabanda's doing the work, Ann Basting is doing the work, Orly Israel's doing the work. I see Chris Murchison is on this call. He's doing the work. Andy Engel is doing the work. Everyone here is doing the work. This entire series is about doing the work. And I know we're almost at time, but what I want to say is that stick around for the conversation that's happening after this formal discussion. Stay in community, see who stays on to, get into conversation, see if you live close by each other, and continue what's happening here on the computer with perhaps what can happen next, which is an in-person conversation. Andy, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Allison, thank you so much. And thank you so much for this partnership over the years, both with your series on grief and this series on loneliness. It's been a pleasure working with you. You are so rigorous in the research you do for all of our guests. You're a great facilitator, so I just want to give a shout out to you. I want to give a shout out to Orly, to Dixon, to Anne, to all of you who joined us today for using the chat, for your reflections, for all your good questions. Again, folks will get a follow-up email from all of us with this recording and with the resources from our wonderful speakers and Reimagine and Allison. And I hope you will stick around now for our breakout rooms. But before we go into breakout rooms, I have a little plug to make. We want you to fill out a survey. This is extremely helpful for us in how we design our virtual events here at Reimagine. My colleague Nicole will paste a link in the chat. There it is. Thank you so much, Nicole. I also want to give all of you a first look at this new project we're developing. Let me just share my screen just for a moment. Yes, so here we go. Whoops, there we go. So this initiative is brand new from Reimagine. It is in development. It's being beta tested. It is a new, safe, and inspiring social space to transform loss and adversity into meaning and growth. We want you to give it a test drive. It's built with care. It's a place where you can continue your Reimagine experience. The site emphasizes social journaling. Through writing, this allows you to express your feelings, to track your moods, and to connect with others. And you can share your own journey through guided prompts that the platform offers. And that journey might include dreams. It might include creative projects, small, sweet steps towards growth and transformation. And you can engage with the stories of others and hold space for others. If you're interested in being one of the first users on this new platform, please let us know in the survey. There's a question about that. We'll reach out to you when there's an opportunity to join the platform. And now I'm going to close this. I'm going to say goodbye to Allison, to Orly, to Dixon, and Anne. Can we just show some love to these 4 people before they head out into the world? Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, now I'm going to get you all ready for our breakout rooms. You're going to be randomly placed in small groups, 3 to 4 people each per group. You'll have 20 minutes together. For those who do opt in for these breakout rooms, I have a request. We want a minimum of audio participation. There's nothing more creepy than being in a breakout room when someone is not saying anything and you can't see them. So yeah, so I got some snaps from Kia, thank you. So if that's not for you, you have permission to go. But I do ask that we have a minimum of audio participation in these breakout rooms. And might be mindful of your time when you are speaking in these breakout rooms. You're going to begin briefly by introducing yourself in alphabetical order by first name. We'll paste instructions in the chat now for those who might need some help while they're in the breakout rooms. You may want to copy and paste what Nicole is sharing in the chat so you can refer to it if you need it. And let's see. I want to offer now a selection of prompts for all of you to use while you're in the breakout rooms. These prompts are inspired by a really good organization out there called the Campaign to End Loneliness. It's their measurement tool. And you're going to start with choosing one of these prompts. And after the first round in your group, if there's time, please respond to another one of these prompts. So here are the 2 prompts that Nicole's pasting in the chat now. Who are the people in your life that you could add to a list of individuals who you would feel comfortable asking for help if you need it? And how did you get to know them? The second prompt, are you content with your friendships and your relationships? If not, do you have thoughts on ways to make those connections more fulfilling?